My name is Thomas Harley, and I used to be the kind of man people looked through. Not past. Through. Like I was made of glass, or smoke, or nothing at all. I worked the overnight shift at a distribution warehouse on the edge of Millhaven, Ohio. The kind of town where the gas stations outnumber the restaurants and everybody knows everybody, except when they don't want to. My job was simple. I moved boxes. I stacked pallets. I wore a yellow safety vest that was 2 sizes too big and smelled faintly of someone else's sweat, and I did my work quietly, in the dark, while the rest of the town slept. I had been doing this for 11 years. The managers at Fulton Freight and Distribution called me Tommy, not because we were close, because they couldn't be bothered to remember that I preferred Thomas. The younger guys on the loading dock called me Ghost, because I moved so quietly and stayed so late. I think they meant it as a compliment, but it never quite felt like one. A ghost is something that used to matter, something that got left behind. I didn't have many friends. I had an apartment above a dry cleaner on Emmett Street, a microwave I'd owned since 2009, and a small orange cat named Biscuit who had shown up on my fire, escaped one January and never left. Biscuit didn't care that I was quiet. She didn't care that I wore a faded vest or drove a truck with a cracked windshield. She just sat on my chest in the mornings when I came home and purred like a small engine until I fell asleep. That was my life. And honestly, most days I was okay with it. The trouble started, or maybe it ended, on a Tuesday in late October. I had just finished a double shift. 14 hours of moving freight, signing manifests, and hauling hand trucks across a concrete floor. My back ached the way it always did by the end of a long night. That low, persistent ache that starts at the base of your spine and spreads upward like water through cracked stone. I clocked out at 6 a.m, drove to the Sunridge Diner on Route 9, and slid into my usual booth, the one near the window, where the vinyl was patched with a strip of silver tape and the view looked out over the empty parking lot and the flat grey sky. I always came here after a long shift. The coffee was strong and the booths were warm and nobody bothered me. I ordered what I always ordered, 2 eggs over easy wheat toast and a small orange juice. The waitress, a tired-looking woman named Carolyn who had worked there longer than I had worked at the warehouse, brought my coffee without me asking. That small thing, that silent recognition, meant more to me than I knew how to say. I was halfway through my eggs when the family came in. There were 4 of them. A man in an expensive-looking coat, a woman with perfect posture and a silk scarf, and 2 teenage children who were both staring at their phones. They took the large booth across from mine, the one near the back, the nice one, and they spread out immediately, the way people do when they're used to having space. The man flagged down Carolyn before she'd even reach their table. Not by raising his hand, by snapping his fingers. I noticed that. I always notice things like that. Small moments of dismissal. Little cracks in how people treat each other. Carolyn didn't flinch. She just walked over, order pad in hand, and smiled the way she always smiled. Tired but genuine. "Morning. What can I get you all started with?" The man looked at her the way some people look at furniture. Not with malice, exactly. Just without seeing. "Coffee," he said. "And make sure it's fresh. Last time it was lukewarm." "Of course," Carolyn said. "And I need to know if the eggs are cage-free," the woman added. "I don't eat anything that isn't cage-free. I'll check with the kitchen," Carolyn said. "You don't know?" The woman said, not unkindly, but not kindly either. Carolyn said she'd find out right away. She turned to go. And as she did, the man said something to his wife. Something low, something I couldn't fully hear, and both of them laughed quietly. One of the teenagers looked up from their phone just long enough to smirk. I looked down at my toast. Carolyn came back with their coffees. She set them down carefully, explained about the eggs they were not cage-free. The kitchen used standard large, and the woman made a small sound of displeasure and ordered something else. The man examined his coffee cup before drinking from it, turning it slightly in the light, as though inspecting it for flaws. I finished my breakfast and sat quietly for a while, the way I always did, watching the parking lot fill up slowly as the town woke up. A school bus passed. A woman walked a golden retriever. 2 men in work boots stood outside a pickup, talking and drinking from travel mugs. When Carolyn came to refill my coffee, I held the cup up to her with both hands. "Thank you," I said. "You're always kind to me." She looked at me for a moment, a little surprised. Then she smiled, a real one, not the tired professional one. "You're easy to be kind to, Thomas," she said. I left her a $30 tip on a $9 breakfast. I always did when I could. It wasn't much, but it was the thing I had. I don't tell that story to make myself sound good. I tell it because it's the last morning I remember feeling invisible. Everything changed 3 weeks later, on a Thursday. I was working the floor when my manager, a man named Brett who wore his authority like a new shirt, stiff and slightly uncomfortable, called me into his office. Brett was the kind of man who kept a motivational poster on his wall and never seemed to notice the irony of telling underpaid workers that their attitude determined their altitude. He sat behind his desk and didn't offer me a chair. "We're restructuring the overnight team," he said, not looking up from his computer screen. "Your position is being eliminated. 2 weeks' notice. Severance is in your final check." I stood there for a moment. 11 years, I said quietly. "I know, Tommy. It's a business decision." He finally looked up. "You're a hard worker. I'll give you a reference." He said it like he was doing me a favor. Like a reference was a gift. After 11 years of quiet, faithful, uncomplaining service. I thought about the winters I'd come in through ice storms. The weekends I'd covered when nobody else would. The time the loading bay flooded and I'd stayed 4 extra hours helping mop water off the floor while Brett watched from the doorway with a cup of coffee. I didn't say any of that. I said, "Thank you for letting me know," and I walked back out to the floor, finished my shift, and drove home in the cold grey morning. Biscuit was waiting on the windowsill. I sat down on the floor next to her and didn't move for a long time. The first week after I lost the job was the hardest week I can remember. Not because of the money, though the money was a real and pressing concern. Not because of the routine, though I missed it more than I expected to. It was hardest because without the warehouse, I didn't know what shape my days were supposed to be. I had built my life around the simplest possible structure. Show up, work hard, go home. And now that structure was gone, and underneath it there was just open, quiet, formless time. I applied to jobs. Warehouse positions. Delivery driving. A custodial opening at the elementary school. I sent out applications every morning and spent the afternoons walking, because the apartment felt too small when I was still in it. Millhaven is a small town, but it has good walking. There are old neighborhoods with wide sidewalks and maple trees that had turned brilliant orange and red by that point in October. There is a park along the river with wooden benches worn smooth by years of use. There is a small commercial district with a hardware store, a barber shop, a florist, and a used bookstore called Pages that had been there since before I was born. I started going into Pages in the afternoons. The owner was a woman named Ruth Page. Yes, the store was named after her. A fact she seemed both proud of and slightly embarrassed by. She was somewhere in her 70s, small and sharp-eyed, with silver hair cut close and reading, glasses that she wore on a chain around her neck. She had a particular gift for knowing exactly where every book in her store was located, which was remarkable because the store appeared, at first glance, to be organized by no system whatsoever. The first time I came in, I browsed for 20 minutes and left without buying anything. The second time, I picked up a battered paperback novel and brought it to the counter. Ruth looked at the book. Then she looked at me. "You're the man from the warehouse," she said. "On Fulton Road." I was surprised. "You know me?" "I know your truck," she said. "You park it at the diner on Route 9 sometimes." Early mornings. She rang up the book. "You haven't been there recently." "I lost my job," I said, before I decided to say it. She didn't say she was sorry, the way most people would have. She just nodded slowly, as though receiving information. "Are you good with your hands?" she asked. I said I supposed I was. "I have boxes in the back that need organizing. Old stock. I'll pay you by the hour and you can take any books you want from the discard pile." It wasn't the kind of offer I was used to getting. I stood there for a moment, trying to figure out if there was something I was missing. "Why?" I asked. Ruth looked at me over her reading glasses. "Because you look like someone who could use a useful thing to do," she said. "And I could use the help. Does there need to be more to it than that?" I started the next morning. The back room of Page's books was something between an archive and a disaster. Floor-to-ceiling shelves sagged under the weight of decades of accumulated stock, water damaged at laces, encyclopedias missing their final volumes, romance novels with broken spines, coffee table books about places that no longer looked the way they did in the photographs. There were boxes I don't think anyone had opened in 15 years. I worked through it methodically, the way I'd always worked, quietly, thoroughly without complaint. I built a system. Salvageable stock sorted by genre and condition. Genuine discards set aside. Items that might have value flagged for Ruth's attention. Ruth brought me coffee at 10 every morning. Strong coffee in a heavy ceramic mug with a small chip in the handle. She never asked how the work was going. She seemed to trust that it was going fine, which made me want to make sure it was. We didn't talk much at first. But over the days, we began to talk a little. She asked me where I'd grown up. Millhaven. Same as her, though we'd never crossed paths that I knew of. She asked what I'd studied in school. I told her I'd taken 2 years of community college before money ran out, mostly general coursework. Nothing that led anywhere specific. "What did you like?" she asked. Not what were you good at? What did you like? Nobody had asked me that in a long time. "History," I said, after thinking about it. "And writing a little. I used to write things. Just for myself." Ruth looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What kind of things?" "Stories, mostly. About ordinary people. Small things that happened." I felt a little embarrassed saying it. "Nothing anybody would want to read." "How do you know?" she said. I didn't have an answer for that. On my 3rd week working at Page's, a man came in looking for a specific book. He was well-dressed, mid-50s, with the kind of careful grooming that suggests someone who thinks about how he appears. He spoke to Ruth at the counter, with the easy authority of someone who assumed the world would arrange itself to his convenience. The book he wanted was a first edition of a regional, Ohio history, something Ruth might or might not have in the back, she said. She asked me to check. I knew the back room well by then. I found the book in 20 minutes, not a first edition, but a very early printing in good condition, and brought it out. The man examined it. He seemed satisfied. Then he looked at me. Really looked at me, for the first time, and something crossed his face. A flicker of recognition. "You worked at Fulton Freight," he said. "I did," I said. "I thought I recognized you. I've been in there a few times, picking up shipments." He paused. "They let you go?" "Restructuring," I said. He nodded slowly, turning the book over in his hands. "That's a shame. You always had everything organized perfectly in there. I used to think whoever ran that floor really knew what they were doing." I didn't know what to say to that. In 11 years at the warehouse, not one manager had said anything like it. "My name is Gerald Foss," the man said, extending his hand. I run a logistics consulting firm over in Claremont. We help small and mid-sized distribution operations improve their systems. He tilted his head slightly. Are you working anywhere currently? Here, I said. Helping Ruth. Ruth brought me coffee at 10 every morning. Strong coffee in a heavy ceramic mug with a small chip in the handle. She never asked how the work was going. She seemed to trust that it was going fine, which made me want to make sure it was. We didn't talk much at first, but over the days we began to talk a little. She asked me where I'd grown up. Millhaven. Same as her, though we'd never crossed paths that I knew of. She asked what I'd studied in school. I told her I'd taken 2 years of community college before money ran out, mostly general coursework. Nothing that led anywhere specific. What did you like? She asked. Not what were you good at? What did you like? Nobody had asked me that in a long time. History, I said, after thinking about it. And writing a little. I used to write things. Just for myself. Ruth looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What kind of things? Stories mostly. About ordinary people. Small things that happened. I felt a little embarrassed saying it. Nothing anybody would want to read. How do you know? She said. I didn't have an answer for that. On my 3rd week working at Pages, a man came in looking for a specific book. He was well-dressed, mid-50s, with the kind of careful grooming that suggests someone who thinks about how he appears. He spoke to Ruth at the counter, with the easy authority of someone who assumed the world would arrange itself to his convenience. The book he wanted was a first edition of a regional, Ohio history, something Ruth might or might not have in the back, she said. She asked me to check. I knew the back room well by then. I found the book in 20 minutes, not a first edition, but a very early printing in good condition, and brought it out. The man examined it. He seemed satisfied. Then he looked at me. Really looked at me, for the first time, and something crossed his face. A flicker of recognition. You worked at Fulton Freight, he said. I did, I said. I thought I recognized you. I've been in there a few times, picking up shipments. He paused. They let you go? Restructuring, I said. He nodded slowly, turning the book over in his hands. That's a shame. You always had everything organized perfectly in there. I used to think whoever ran that floor really knew what they were doing. I didn't know what to say to that. In 11 years at the warehouse, not one manager had said anything like it. My name is Gerald Foss, the man said, extending his hand. I run a logistics consulting firm over in Claremont. We help small and mid-sized distribution operations improve their systems. He tilted his head slightly. Are you working anywhere currently? Here, I said. Helping Ruth. Gerald looked around the bookstore with a kind of fond amusement. Then he looked back at me. Would you be open to a conversation? About something more permanent? Ruth was watching from behind the counter, pretending to read something, but I could see the small satisfied curve at the corner of her mouth. I suppose I would, I said. I want to be careful here, because this is the part of the story that sounds too neat, too convenient, like something arranged by a screenwriter rather than by life. But that's genuinely what happened. Gerald Foss and I had coffee that Friday at the diner on Route 9, my diner, my booth, with Carolyn bringing coffee before I'd asked for it. He told me about his company. He consulted with warehouses and distribution centers across southern Ohio, helping them identify inefficiencies, redesign workflows, train floor supervisors. He had 3 employees and more work than they could handle. He wanted someone who understood floor operations from the inside, someone who had actually lived in those spaces, not just studied them from a spreadsheet. He offered me a salary that was more than double what I'd made at Fulton Freight. I sat with that information quietly for a moment. Why me? I asked. The same question I'd asked Ruth. Gerald set down his coffee cup. Because I've been in a lot of warehouses, he said. And most of them are run by people who think they know more than the workers. The good ones, the ones that actually function, are the ones where somebody on the floor genuinely cares about the system. Not for a promotion. Just because they care. He looked at me steadily. You cared. I could tell from 50 feet away. I thought about 11 years of careful, quiet work. 11 years of arranging things precisely because precision mattered, even when nobody noticed. I'll need to give Ruth proper notice, I said. Gerald smiled. Of course, I worked at Page's for 2 more weeks before starting at Foss Consulting. On my last day, Ruth and I sorted the final boxes in the back room together, and when we were done, the back room was cleaner and more organized than it had probably been in 30 years. Ruth made tea. She switched to tea in the afternoons, and we sat on 2 old stools among the shelves and drank it quietly. You didn't need to do all of this, I said, gesturing at the room, meaning more than the room. I know, she said. I wanted to. Why? She was quiet for a moment, turning her mug in her hands. My husband worked in a factory for 22 years, she said. Good man. Hard worker. The kind of man people looked through. She paused. He deserved better than he got. Most quiet, faithful people do. She looked at me directly. I suppose I like giving someone a useful thing to do when I can. I didn't say anything for a while. The afternoon light came through the small window at the top of the back wall, falling across the sorted shelves in long amber strips. Thank you, Ruth, I said. Don't thank me, she said. Just do good work. That's all any of us can do. I have been at Foss Consulting for almost 2 years now. The work suits me in ways I didn't expect. I spend my days inside the systems I used to be part of. But now I can see them whole. From above, the way you can only see a map when you step back from the territory. I walk warehouse floors and I understand them in my bones. In my back, in the muscle memory of 11 years of quiet labor. I know what it feels like to move freight at 2 in the morning, when your feet ache and your manager hasn't looked at you with real recognition in months. That knowledge is not nothing. It turns out it is, in fact, worth quite a lot. I still go to the Sunridge diner on Route 9. Not as often. My schedule is different now. My mornings are different. But often enough. Carolyn still brings my coffee before I ask. I still leave a generous tip. A few months ago, Brett, my old manager from Fulton Freight, came into the diner while I was having breakfast. He sat 2 booths away, alone, reading something on his phone. He looked older, a little tired. He didn't recognize me at first. Then he did. He raised a hand in a half wave. I raised mine back. He came over after a moment. Stood at the edge of my booth. Tommy, he said. I heard you were doing well. Thomas, I said. And yes, I am, he nodded. He seemed to want to say something else, and then thought better of it. Good, he said. That's good. He went back to his booth. I finished my breakfast. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter. I felt, more than anything, quietly clear. The way the air feels after a long rain, when everything is washed and still, and you can see for miles. I think about that family in the diner sometimes. The man in the expensive coat, the woman with the silk scarf, the teenagers with their phones. I don't know who they were or where they went. I never saw them again. They moved through Millhaven, like people move through places they don't think matter, quickly, without looking, leaving nothing behind. I think about Carolyn, who smiled anyway. About Ruth, who saw something worth helping. About Gerald, who looked at a quiet man in a used bookstore and recognized something real. I think about all the ways dignity arrives in your life. Not announced, not dramatic, not in the forms you expect. It arrives in a cup of coffee brought without asking, in an offer made without obligation, in someone who looks at you and says, I see something here. I think it's worth something. I have learned that being overlooked is not the same as being without value. I have learned that quiet faithfulness, done over years, leaves marks in the world even when nobody is watching. I have learned that the people who treat you like you don't matter are often, underneath their certainty, a little afraid of the people who are simply doing their work, without needing to be noticed. I still have the apartment on Emmett Street. I still have Biscuit, who is older now and sleeps more than she used to, but still finds her way to my chest on slow mornings, and still purrs like a small engine until I close my eyes. Some things don't need to change. The ones that needed to, changed. And I was there for all of it. Quietly, faithfully, doing my work. That, I have decided, is enough. That, it turns out, was always enough. And now, wherever you are as you listen to this, whatever weight you've been carrying, whatever rooms you've been overlooked in, I want you to know that your quiet, steady presence in this world means something. You don't have to be loud to matter. You don't have to be seen by everyone to be real. Just close your eyes now and let the day go. Let it all settle. You've done enough for today. Rest now. Rest easy. You are not a ghost. You are here and you are enough, and everything else can wait until morning. N tilde.